My presentation is a little different than everyone else's. Instead of looking at injuries or strengthening programs, I looked at ethical decision making. There's been little research done on ethics in athletic training, and in order to prepare athletic training students for the profession, I believe there needs to be an understanding of their ethical views. Because being aware of how the athletic training student sees things can have a better ethical aspect to athletic training in clinical settings for the undergraduate students. And it will be beneficial for future teaching of how to reason and behave in a way that benefits their subjects. And my objective for the study was to understand if there's a difference between moral philosophy and ethical decision making between different colleges, whether the participant is a student or instructor, and by their gender. And to do this, I investigate the moral philosophies of undergraduate athletic training students and instructors, and the effects that gender and size of the school attendant will also be looked into to decide if it affects the individual ethical decision-making scores. Why is ethics in athletic training important? Most athletic training students interact with certified athletic trainers most often by having them as their instructors. And this requires that certified athletic trainers teach and model proper ethical decision-making to students in the clinical setting. Due to this, there is a need to see if different schools are portraying different ethical philosophies to their students. Ethics has an important role in developing interpersonal skills, social consciousness, and human values. In order to effectively develop ethics, it needs to be taught in a way that will approach professional and moral development by reinforcing the connections between the content areas of the athletic trainers and the clinical activities that are actually being performed. And how ethics is being taught in athletic training can have a significant impact on the student's moral development. And seeing if there's a difference in the educational status and gender in the college setting will help develop a better understanding to why athletic trainers act the way they do in certain situations. In order to understand my study, I just have to define a couple terms. An idealist believes that there is rejection, there are certain morals, and that are universally correct or incorrect. They believe that thought is the relation of each experience to that which it expresses, rather than the imposition of ready-made answers. They have a fundamental concern that the welfare of others lies at the heart of some individual's morals. Idealists believe that sometimes others must be harmed in order to produce necessary good. And there's also a relativist, and they believe that there are no absolute truths in ethics, and what is morally right or wrong varies from person to person or from society to society. They stress that whether an action is right or wrong depends purely on the society in which one lives. The same action may be morally right in one society but morally wrong in another. They believe there are no universal moral standards, and that those who score higher on the relativism section of my study tend to have a moral philosophy that is based on rejection of moral universals. And then from there, I split idealists and relativists down into 4 subcategories to gain a better understanding of their ethics. And from that, we got a situationist, who are people should strive to produce the best consequences possible, but believe that moral rules cannot be applied across all situations. It is titled situationism because it requires close inspection of the situation in reaching the appropriate moral choice. Next is an absolutist, and they approve of actions that yield many positive, desirable consequences, and feel that some ethical absolutes are so important that they must be included in any code of ethics. And then there's a subjectivist, and they reject moral rules and are also less idealistic about the possibility of achieving humanitarian goals. People in the subjectivism category describe their moral decisions as subjective, individualistic judgments that cannot be made on the basis of more objective information, such as universal moral absolutes or the extent in which action harms others. And the final one is an exceptionist. That they believe that moral rules should guide our behavior, but that actions that yield some negative consequences should not necessarily be condemned. People in this group are willing to make exceptions to the moral principles that they live by. My subjects for the study were undergraduate athletic training students and certified instructors. I got results back from Emory Henry College, Radford University, King College, Concord University, and Tusculum College. The study did get approved, and all participants were 18 and older and agreed to an informed consent. Out of the surveys I distributed, there were 32 participants, 21 were women, 11 were men, 8 were instructors, and 24 were students. And you'll see I only had results for 1 Concord University professor, 1 from King, and 1 from Tusculum. So when I break it down to study the students and the instructors, I mainly look at Emory, Henry, and Radford since we have the most participants from those schools. The instrument I used was the Ethics Position Questionnaire, also known as the EPQ. It was developed by Forts and was used in order to identify idealism and relativism scores of the participants. The EPQ is a self-reported 20-item survey that consists of two scales, one to measure idealism and the other to measure relativism. The survey has been used in order to examine idealism and relativism as they are related to moral judgments, behavior, business, moral choice, and sexual attitudes and ethical decision-making in medicine. When completing the survey, the participants were asked to note their level of agreement with each statement on a 5-point scale. The scale had a grading of 1 to strongly disagree to 5, which was strongly agree. In order to calculate the idealism score, statements 1 through 10 were added up to measure the degree in which individuals assume that desirable consequences can, with the right action, always be obtained. The first 10 statements contains items such as the existence of potential harm to others is always wrong, irrespective of the benefits to be gained. And in order to gather the relativism scores of participants, items 11 through 20 were added up to measure the extent to which individual rejects universal moral rules when making ethical decisions. The relativism portion of the survey consists of statements such as moral standards should be seen as being individualistic. What one person considers to be moral may be judged to be immoral by another person. The possible scores that the participants could have gained were from the different sections, ranged from 10 to 50, and I distributed this electronically to the participants. And that is some of my results overall. Most people overall, participants, 32, reported higher idealism scores, about 65.6% of the participants, than relativism scores. About 25% of people had relativism scores, and others scored exactly between the two at 6.3%. And I just put a table in so you could kind of see the differences there. Women reported higher idealism scores than men at 71.4%. Men, however, scored higher on relativism at 27.3%, and some male participants were equally split between the two. And then when looking at instructor versus student, instructors reported higher idealism scores than the students at 75%, and some were equally relativist and idealist at 18.2%. And then looking at the different colleges, as I said earlier, the ones with the stars beside them, Concord, Tussle, and King, only had one participant. So Emory and Henry College reported higher idealism scores than Radford University at 66.6%. It wasn't a large percentage difference, but with the number of participants we had, it's kind of going to be like that sometimes, I guess, because that was a limitation of the study. We didn't have a lot of participants. And the single participants from King College and Concord University were both idealists, while Tusculum College participant was equally both. And the 4 subcategories we broke it into: overall, participants reported higher situationist scores than absolutists and exceptionists. Women reported higher situationist scores than men at 85.7%, while men reported higher absolutist scores at 18.2%, and women were also exceptionist at 4.8%. Students reported higher situationist scores than instructors at 91.6%, while the instructors reported higher absolutist scores at 37.5%, and the students also reported an exceptionist score. Looking again at the different colleges, Radford University students reported higher situationist scores than Emory and Henry College. They had 100% across the board. They were all situationists. Emory and Henry College also reported exceptionist and absolutist scores. And the single participants from Concord University and King were absolutists, while the participant from Tusculum College was a situationist. So my conclusion is there is an ethical difference between the genders. There was an ethical difference between the students and instructors, and there was also a difference between Emory and Henry Private D3 and Radford Public D1. Women were more idealistic, while men tended to be more relativistic. This shows that men believe that there are no absolute truths in ethics, and is what morally right or wrong varies from person to person or from society to society. And then the instructors were more idealistic than their students, and they feel as though some people must be harmed in order for a greater good to be achieved. Students who tend to be much younger than the instructors are still under the belief that what is morally right or wrong varies from society to society, and that harm should not be caused to individuals no matter what. Looking at the different colleges, Emory and Henry is a small NCAA Division III school, and Radford University is a much larger Division I school. Emory and Henry participants scored higher on the idealistic portion of the survey, showing they believe more along the lines of instructors that sometimes others must be harmed in order to produce a necessary good. Radford University participants were more relativistic, which shows they believe that if an action could harm an innocent, then it should not be done. My recommendations for future research: there has not been a lot done involving ethics in the training field, so a larger study needs to be conducted than I have the resources here to conduct. Because I do believe there's a need to research whether or not gender, student versus instructor, and college size plays a role in ethical decision making. There also is a need to research how ethics is being taught in different colleges. This will help lead to understanding why some athletic training professionals make the decisions they do. Understanding how ethics is being taught in different colleges will help shape the ethics of future athletic training professionals. Questions?
So when we're looking at the Emory and Henry, like, students versus instructors, do you think that, like, where we kind of varied within that, whereas it seemed the other schools all went together, do you think that, like, I don't know how to word it right, like, that we don't really take the instructor's point of view on things quite as much?
That was one of the things I was trying to look at in the study. I wanted to see if the students tend to follow the instructors because that's what they experience every day and that's kind of the way they go. So I found it interesting that, yeah, Radford had 100% all situationists, which pretty much matched up with their instructors to T, and then we kind of varied to different groups. I'm not exactly sure of why that is, because it's kind of hard to figure out in such a small scale study of why exactly every little thing happens. But
two questions really.
Okay.
One, do you think that the distinctions between the student populations and faculty populations you addressed, do you think they reflect the stance of the school, like Radford, for instance, public?
Right.
There's not that much emphasis on one thing or another versus Emory Henry, let's say, that has a Methodist background. Do you think the ethical approach to that population reflects the school as a whole, or do you think it doesn't matter at all?
I think it does. Just from experience here, Emory and Henry students seem to be very strong in their views, and I think that that's what a liberal arts school kind of teaches you to do, is to be strong in your ethical views. And Radford, they just tended to all follow their instructors, so I'm not sure if maybe, like you said, because they're a larger school, so I'm not sure. But.
And another question, did you look into what Native stance is with how we should approach ethics and what our ethical stance should be, and how that's reflected in the programs that you send out applications to? I say applications.
Yeah. I did. I discussed that in my paper, in my discussion section of my paper, about how, because as I mentioned in the presentation, I feel as though there needs to be a stronger view into ethics, because in order to be professionals, we all follow that, because that's our governing body. So we all have to follow their ethical conduct. So I did look into that, and I mean, as far as I can tell, everything seems to still follow it, but they just kind of vary here and there. I'm not sure if that answers it.
I guess I have a unique perspective. I went to both schools, Radford
Yeah.
and Emory.
This is true.
I guess at Emory, the teachers give you every idea and allow you to develop your own style with it. At Radford, it's just more, here it is, all right, we'll take a test on it, but here we sort of have to learn it, understand it, and we have a practical application of it. And it may be that that's just how they're taught. Just they learn it for a test. The teacher tells them that. But here, it sort of seems we're exposed to more about it. Because I mean, we've had ethics in a couple of athletic training classes, then we've had to take bioethics, opposed to where we just might have had to. I don't even think there's an ethical inquiry that I had to go through up there. So it just may be that they're just getting a little bit of it, and we've been exposed to more of it at the liberal arts school.
And that touched my point why I asked if you reflected, the school and the student population. So I guess you've got the best perspective on it.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Good job, Samantha.